Imagine this: the entire course of your life being changed by something no bigger than the size of a poppy seed. Something that is said to only be a concern if you live in the northeastern states of the US, but has been found in all 50 states. Something that is said to only be a concern during the summertime and the spring, but with climate change on the rise, we've been having longer summers and milder winters. And something that I was told was all in my head, that cognitive therapy or meditation could fix. This thing I'm talking about went undetected, undiagnosed, and worst of all, nobody believed it was real but me. What I'm talking about is a tick bite that went undetected and caused me to get one of the most controversial diagnoses in modern medicine today, stage 3 neurological Lyme disease, also known as persistent or chronic Lyme. Growing up in wooded areas of Maryland, such as Hagerstown and Clear Spring, I spent many days outdoors without a real concept of Lyme disease, tick bite prevention measures, or to the dangers that were hidden in the thick Maryland woods. We're told the #1 symptom to look for Lyme disease is the telltale bullseye rash. But did you know that that rash occurs in only 70% of Lyme disease patients? Of course, me being the overachiever I've always strived to be, I just had to fall under that rare 30% of patients who never reported a tick bite, never reported a bullseye rash, yet tested positive for Lyme bacteria antibodies in my blood. In 2022, according to the CDC, there were almost 63,000 new cases of Lyme disease reported in America. That's a 1.7% increase compared to what was reported between 2017 and 2019. Those numbers are estimated to be much, much higher due to underreporting, with thousands of those cases coming from right here in Maryland. Even so, it still took almost a year to get an official diagnosis as to what caused my mystery illness, which turned out to be Lyme disease. I learned the hard way that when you get bit by a tick and the infection is not caught early, that Lyme bacteria is capable of evading the immune system's response, can sit dormant in the body for weeks, months, sometimes years, slowly showing up in symptoms that mimic many other diseases, many of which I was misdiagnosed with between 2018 and 2020. Some of those include rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, anxiety and depression disorder, and the list goes on. This is where Lyme disease gets its famous great imitator name from. Something else less commonly known about Lyme bacteria is that it's capable of invading any cell or organ in the body if not treated within the first few weeks. Lyme bacteria is capable of passing the blood-brain barrier and can manifest in places such as the brain, eyes, heart, and essentially anywhere the bacteria please. For many, including myself, a traumatic event, whether mental or physical, can trigger an immune response or a flare-up of those symptoms. This is how I ended up spending a year and a half hooked to an IV PICC line, which was an IV port connected from my arm directly into my heart to take antibiotics every day in my 20s, which I'm sure you could imagine was a really fun process. But what's even more bizarre about this sudden illness is all of this didn't happen after a tick bite or after finding a bullseye rash, but after an injury. After tearing my right knee and developing bizarre onset symptoms, I lost both of my jobs at the age of 23, was bedridden, living off of temporary cash assistance and SNAP EBT benefits, unsure what new onset symptom would debilitate me next. In addition to physical symptoms, I was dealing with extreme cognitive problems, from sudden memory loss, vision disturbances from things like eye floaters and twitching, facial paralysis, and an overall brain fog that made me feel, honestly, embarrassed about my cognitive abilities. coming from somebody who was very sharp-minded, writing music, poetry, reading books, to becoming a person who would forget things mid-sentence, slur my speech, get overwhelmed with pain and ringing in my ears, and this overall psychosis that just made me question my reality every single day. What's worse about this sickness and dark time in my life is that many people didn't actually believe I was sick. Many, including doctors and specialists, were convincing me that what I was dealing with wasn't real because for many years, only early stage Lyme disease was studied and highlighted. The effects that come along with a late diagnosis of Lyme disease can be debilitating and has only just started to become public knowledge, but is still not in the forefront when we discuss Lyme and Tickborne disease. I went unheard, dismissed, and sick for almost a year, all while screaming at the top of my lungs, "Something isn't right. This is real, and I'm afraid." This is the turning point in the story where I had to flip the script, find pain within my purpose, find purpose within my pain, and become my own advocate. So I'm sure you've all heard of the term gaslighting before. Well, when you are a chronic Lyme patient, you can feel that gaslighting, not just from friends and family who don't understand why you're still sick or why you have to rest for 3 days after going out for one, but most importantly, when it's felt from the medical community, the ones whom you should be able to trust the most, your doctors. It can create a lot of doubt in your own mind, to the point of having a medical professional tell you, maybe you're just depressed. Prozac will help get your mind back. Or one of the worst lines of them all, it's all in your head. Or to have friends and family say things to you like, shouldn't you be better by now? I researched Lyme disease and it said 2 weeks of antibiotics cures it. Or if you had more faith, you wouldn't need that thing in your arm, talking about my PICC line. Then to later find out that you do have something physically wrong with you that doctors did not catch, and it's just considered controversial, is a sobering reality for many Lyme disease patients such as myself. Despite credible research being published for years telling us otherwise. One recently published, for example, Monica Embers, Associate Professor of Microbiology and Immunology, whose work was published May of 2021, confirming persistent Lyme infection in the brains of primates despite getting aggressive antibiotic therapy. According to an article published by Harvard Health in April of 2024, the term medical gaslighting describes when a medical professional seem to invalidate or dismiss your concerns, and this could be tied to a misdiagnosis or delayed treatment. Nonetheless, this can leave a person feeling dismissed, ignored, and worse, as if their experience is invalid or not real. This can be a psychologically exhausting process for patients, and when you know your body and you know something is wrong, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and do your own research. These dark days of illness and seeking answers went on for what feels like forever and was a fever dream of doctor's appointments, antibiotics, herbal treatments, essentially anything I could try to do to get my life back. That included both oral and IV antibiotics daily, putting healthy antibodies into my blood through IV infusion twice a month called IVIG, grueling herbal detox protocols, and the list goes on. My mental health started to slip, and I started to question my life, feeling as if I was living on borrowed time. But I wasn't. I just had to learn from other advocates and trailblazers out in the world who had to stand up for themselves and for their health, such as the strong warriors in the late 80s, early 90s who had to advocate during the AIDS and HIV epidemic. They refused to give up until treatment was accessible, preventative, and accurate. And because of what patient organizations and advocates fought for and what they did, AIDS and HIV patients are able to live a long life, whereas in the 80s and 90s, getting that diagnosis could have been considered a death sentence. Sometimes you have to pull inspiration from other advocates to feel their passion and fire and remind yourself that you are worth going to bat for too. Despite what everyone in my corner was telling me, I continued to research until I found an LLMD, also known as a Lyme literate medical doctor, through a social media support group full of thousands of chronically ill people just like me, whose Lyme or tick-borne disease was not caught early, who fell between the cracks of the standard guidelines of what we are told to look for when it comes to Lyme and tick-borne disease, and left to find answers themselves. Finding this community showed me I was never truly alone with this late-stage battle of Lyme, but rather I just needed to look a little deeper beyond the surface to find the truth and my tribe. I finally found a doctor who had been studying autoimmune and zoonotic diseases since the 80s, and he helped me make sense of this sudden illness that I was dealing with, and I'm still being treated to this day by that same doctor. My LLMD was able to not only validate, but slowly improve the symptoms that were debilitating me that other doctors dismissed as psychosomatic or all in my head. I found a treatment plan that, mind you, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life and included so many IV needles, 10 pills a day, Herxing, which if you've ever treated a deep infection, it's when bacteria gets killed off and it makes you sicker and weaker for months. But it got me back to a functioning citizen of society again. And I was slowly able to rebuild my life, but it took much willpower. Willpower to forgive, willpower to continue treatment when it was making me sicker, a lot of tears, and a lot of faith to stand up for myself and believe that one day, this invisible nightmare that my friends, family, and community had no idea I was trapped in would eventually become something manageable and something I could learn to live with. There's a quote I'd like to share from American author Nora Zeal Hertzen, where she says, "If you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say that you enjoyed it." As a chronic Lyme patient, this rings so very true to me. While navigating most of my 20s being very sick, I had the realization that this untreated infection could have been prevented with better diagnostics, early treatment, and an overall increased awareness on the topic. Living in Maryland, a state with heavily concentrated wooded areas, home to thousands of brand new Lyme and tick-borne disease cases annually, ticks are biting not only deer, but rabbits, raccoons, squirrels, and the new #1 reservoir for Lyme bacteria, the white-footed mouse. Those critters are traveling to our backyards where a disease-filled tick could potentially fall off and infect you or a loved one, making this disease something that can be contracted in your own backyard. Increasing my knowledge base on zoonotic and autoimmune diseases encouraged me to rise up and become the trailblazer I was meant to be in this space of awareness. It set me on a path of healing from what I had experienced, understanding, acceptance, and peace. But it took standing up for myself during my darkest hour and believing that the light was even possible, which can feel completely impossible. In this new chronically ill world I navigated, I had to learn I couldn't just become equal to my peers without a little extra effort due to my compromised immune system and daily symptoms. And this created a lot of comparison and self-doubt towards myself that I had no choice but to work through. I had to almost let my old self die so that this new version of me could be born that you're seeing today. At the peak of my Lyme flare, I couldn't hold a full-time job. I couldn't stand for long periods of time without getting vertigo to the point of passing out. I couldn't keep up with simple tasks like taking care of myself, brushing my hair, standing in the shower, and I would need days to recover after doing something simple, like taking a walk or even being in the sun. Unfortunately, that last part still rings true to this day because it still takes a lot to show up every day with daily symptoms and overall damage that has happened to me due to untreated Lyme. I had to learn to be more gentle with myself, more patient with my healing process, and understand that my path is not going to look the same as the next person, And it's okay not to be okay every day. It is okay to be human. Saying this always gives me cold chills because this reality is not just mine, but millions of other people who live the same exact way every single day. And at times, the pain from being dismissed, ignored, gaslit, and plain out sick can cause one's mind and body to be defeated to the point of wanting to give up. This brings me to one of the saddest facts about Lyme disease that we don't talk about enough, is that there is an estimated almost 1,200 Lyme disease-associated suicides in the US alone annually. In my 6 years of treating this late diagnosis, we have lost multiple advocates and patients to suicide. People I have met in online support groups, people I'd see at doctor's offices, at Lyme disease rallies, gone because they couldn't take the pain anymore. Stephanie Lavoie, 30 years old, and Amelia Champagne, only 22 years old, both died within the past 2 years by suicide linked to their untreated Lyme disease. Their deaths are a reminder to me every single day to keep advocating, not only for my experience with this life-stealing disease, but for the millions of other people who suffer silently every day. And it's led me to 3 years of serving a nonprofit whose sole mission is to eradicate Lyme and tick-borne disease in America. We can change the narrative by speaking up when we know something is wrong, raising more awareness about our experiences, and remembering we are the best advocates for ourselves. This self-belief that answers and a path to healing would eventually come led me to network with the experts, find an LLMD who understood my unique medical situation, and reminded me of who I was supposed to be, a pioneer in this space for Lyme and tick-borne disease awareness. If you are living with a chronic illness, especially those of you with invisible ailments and diseases, such as fibromyalgia, MS, lupus, hyperthyroidism, especially my Lyme and tick-borne disease friends, whatever it is, where you may look healthy and fine on the outside, but inside you are suffering daily, just know that you are not alone, and never let this world discredit your experience or steal your voice. Thank you.